Episode 13 of the Senteon and CIS webinar series, a deep dive into the CIS benchmarks. Today we are combining three topics, shutdown settings, system cryptography, and system objects. So I'm your host, Zach Kromkowski from Senteon, joined by my co-host in person, Rich McGraw from CIS, and we have our special guest, Jennifer White, joining us from Georgia. How are we all doing today, guys?
Outstanding. Good to be here in the Valley in studio. Thank you very much.
Yes, doing great. I'm in Atlanta, but I love seeing we have progressed so far. And you as a live studio, your first guest. I mean, we're big time.
We're coming along. Jen's been part of the Senteon journey for quite a while. Full transparency, she is a Senteon advisory member, so she is going to be hyping up these benchmarks today with her deep dive stories. So very happy to have you following this journey from when the walls were bare and I was just starting this little series. So very cool. But Jen, I mean, I can introduce you. You're a virtual CISO, very active in the community, volunteer work, but do you mind just kicking off the episode with a little intro of yourself and maybe how you got into security?
Ooh, okay, if I can remember back that far. But
should have prepped you a little bit more.
As far as my journey, I've been in security for over 25 years. It's actually, back then it was called more networking. And then this little thing called security came along and they thought, oh, well, maybe we should lock everything down. So my journey has been one that I've evolved like the products and servers that we all support and infrastructure that we lay security on top of. I've rode that wave and worked for several companies that are now all either teed up on within the semantic stack and or on the cutting room floor, as they say. It's such an incestuous journey, and it's been a great ride seeing the different ways that security has evolved, but more importantly, how the business has allowed security to be part of the conversation, and they understand the importance of it. And, but if you were lucky, you had an appointed CIS CISO, he may have policy control, maybe, but no budget. So your job was literally to help them advocate on behalf of their department and everybody else's to ensure that they could get projects paid for. And so it's such a change and shift as to where we've come, where we now see security metrics at the board level and within meetings. And if you don't have an expert that can actually, articulate where and why we need to be and meet some benchmarks and others and don't need to meet others and spend properly to meet your business, it's just a plethora of information that has boiled down to letting you run IT as a business, more importantly, your security infrastructure as a business to support what you're doing versus, well, let's just throw it against the wall.
No, I love that, Jen. Working with someone like yourself can really help people meet their goals because, people don't know always where to start. And there's so many tools and so many regs and people just get lost. So someone like yourself that can really help guide the process and, make baby steps towards the goal line in a cost-effective manner is really what people need.
Thank you. And it's fun. I love security. You asked how I got into it. I went to school to be a sports journalism major. So hard cry. We do
makes perfect sense,
right? We do talk a lot about football and other sports, but I fell into it, and I really like solving problems, and I think you have to have a love for dissecting and solving, and I always look at things solution first. So it's like if you take that mindset, it's a good blend. Like have the solution, what's your end game, how are you going to get there, which again, in this, for the sake of this conversation, that's that business problem you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
What do we need to successfully do that? And
Jen's playing chess out there. She's not doing checkers.
amen, my friend. Yeah.
And Jen, I was hoping you could elaborate on one thing. A reoccurring topic I'm finding in all our guests is this concept of community and security leaders really getting involved at the ground level. So you kind of kicked off talking about your involvement with early stage companies, seeing the stages, kind of the field change, and obviously you are associated with Senteon directly. What would you say, and I guess what's the importance of security leaders today really seeking out and giving back to the up and coming companies like us?
So I'll just, great question. I'm going to give you a preamble to that. And when I get approached a lot, Zach had a very wonderful ask. And so we engaged in conversation. And as we did, I absolutely loved what they were doing because it was different. It was smart. It came from a side of not just another toolkit that you're going to pop up into your belt and, oh, turn it on. And guess what? Now it's jamming up my SIM. Like, no, I don't need that. This is an intelligent way to master your network. The challenge they had was having such a young, brilliant team that they needed some adults in the room. So,
unfortunately, sometimes
that's right, son.
The gray hairs can help move the sales cycle along.
So, it's myself and a few other gentlemen, and it's really twofold. It's like you look at it as a young company. There are larger enterprises that know that they need and want this type of product, but they've also been burned by other startups that have, I can speak from experience. We
on the cutting floor,
replaced another vendor and then went back in 3 years later. Oopsie, just kidding. The other vendor bought us.
Yeah.
So now we're transitioning you back. So you really need to have that street cred to say, build a business case and where this is a different offering and it's a collaborative effort with the people like yourself and CIS. It's not going away. We know that.
And what I love about the offering too, Jen, is it's doing the basics better.
Yes.
And security comes down to the basics. We're talking about elementary cybersecurity hygiene, the way to implement it, the way to track it, the way to audit it, and the way to do security right from the basics.
Amen.
And, I feel like people need better basics, not more security. So
it's
this is about the basics.
7-layer stack. Like, how many products are we going to continue to come up with that overlap and do the same thing? And if you,
that's the shiny penny, Jen, and that's where you help people, because people get enamored with the shiny penny, and they need a voice of reason like yourself to help them really look at big picture and get the best value for their money and not just focus on the shiny penny.
Right. And I appreciate that. But what helps build and validate that is people like CIS. Because now you've got, here's an expert. They're going to tell you, you align it, here's benchmarks. If it doesn't apply to anything you're doing, follow what they're saying. Yep. If it does apply to what you're doing, pay more attention, and then team up with Senteon, right? Like, this is an intelligent tool. I kind of like it to not just security, but it does bridge back to the network, because we are talking about objects that are traveling across the network.
Absolutely. And you brought up something really interesting, and Senteon really does focus on the managed security service provider space and being channel focused. And you brought up the concept of mergers and acquisitions. This is a question I get daily in our sales conversations. Hey, if I deploy you across my entire 1,000 endpoint base, what's going to guarantee you being here next year? It really is part of that sales cycle and that customer journey that I need to be able to talk confidently about. So It's interesting you brought that up, and I'm curious if you'll elaborate a little bit more on that. How do CISOs and executives really view emerging technology? How do they determine if this company will likely be around 3-5 years from now? Like, how does that thought process go at that level?
So it's a great question, and there's a few different key metrics that are going to go into it. Number one, how critical is what you're doing to their day-to-day business? And it also depends who's buying whom, right?
Let's face it, money talks.
Yeah, and just because somebody buys you doesn't mean that the technology goes away. There's a lot of factors as to why somebody would want to buy another company, and some of it may be user base, right? Or it's a competitor, and you're starting to bite above the ankle and gain more market share. So typically, if it's either one of those scenarios, the same technology will be there. But, we've always heard that term, people buy from people. If you have a trusted team, and this goes back to even saying you need adults in the room, you have a balanced team of people who have been in the industry for years. You have investors that believe in you. You have a good portfolio and round mix of clients. You're not heavy in one sector because that can kill a company as well. Those are the type of things that people are going to look for and in making a decision. Some people may have their own politically motivated internally checkbox. Oh, they give so much to charity. There are circumstances beyond your control right now. I would just focus on today, building that customer base. And when that answer comes up, just say, have them talk to me.
Talk to Jen. That's what I was going to say. Talk to Jen.
Yeah.
She knows.
But also, that is on you to, I think this is where in the sales process, people can do a better job qualifying and understand if they have any other startup or early adopter technologies anywhere within. And chances are they do, because let's face it, the cloud really has only been out for about maybe 20 years. That people are really, really focused on it. This is just another intelligent way to run your business.
No, I appreciate that response. And yeah, I mean, vendor, or rather businesses, CISOs out there, I mean, I would encourage you always to talk to your early stage companies you're considering, because that is a question I come across. I'm happy to talk about that from Senteon's perspective. Most founders know their strategy. Senteon is definitely on a mission to create that shift in mindset from a reactive security state to more proactive preventative, and this isn't going anywhere. So
no, and again, further validates why CIS and Senteon are such a great partnership, because CIS is not going to leave anybody hanging either.
No, exactly right.
No,
yeah, our benchmarks will remain and will continue to evolve and grow and expand and continue to protect those that want to participate.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, if you think, and this is the wild part, right? So the internet's been around debatable number of years, but all of the same core principles have not changed. And if you understand engineering, then you get it.
Yep.
So that is the part that does make me chuckle sometimes.
and you brought up how the cloud is kind of a newer thing. I know, Rich, you're in town in SF, joining me in studio. You were just at a trade show kind of focusing on this, Google Next. Is that right?
Yeah, the Google Next conference is happening live right now at the Moscone Center. And I took a break from my responsibilities at the conference to come join in studio with Zach and Jen. So excited about that. But yeah, the conference is good. There's, huge AI presence, as folks might expect these days. But the reason why CIS participates is people may not be aware of what CIS does in the cloud completely. We have benchmarks that for each of the public cloud platforms, specifically AWS, Azure, and GCP, where we have a foundations benchmark that gives those cloud platforms sort of guidance on high-level settings to secure their tenant. We have integrations in place and so forth as well on each of the platforms to do continuous checking of your settings, which is nice. So I encourage people to take advantage of that if you're not already. But the other thing that we really do in the cloud is we CIS has a dev team, and we apply the CIS benchmark settings to the most common virtual machine images, all the common flavors of Windows and the most popular Linux distributions. So our dev team creates a pre-configured virtual machine image. We publish that in the marketplaces on GCP, AWS, and Azure. And the reason why people like those is you can, just go to the marketplace, search on CIS, and you can spin up your favorite VM, and it's pre-configured with all the proper benchmark settings as well as a compliance report. It's really affordable. It's normal compute charges from the cloud platform, and then 2 cents per machine hour premium for the good guys for CIS.
Yeah.
So if you spun up a VM now and ran it for a full year, it costs you about just under $180 for the full year. So we have many customers across all industries worldwide that take advantage of those VMs. And it was actually the part of business that I originally joined CIS and helped ramp up a few years ago before I left CIS for a bit and came back. But our customers have consumed over 1 billion machine hours that's billion with a B on our VMs across those cloud platforms. So they're highly successful. And we also have some container images pre-configured on the AWS platform, and we'll continue to evolve our offerings there. So I've been at the Google conference. We're actually a top seller in their marketplace. So we're a sponsor of the event, and if anyone is in the San Francisco area, stop by. It's booth 1700 and something. I'll be there tomorrow.
That Moscone Center, you can get lost for days up in there.
That's true.
Yes.
Very true.
But yes, I mean, cloud security is a place where people tend to definitely have still reservations.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go back to it's the same principles.
Yep.
It's the same 7 layers. You're just entering the door in a different way.
You are.
It's
you are potentially broadening your attack surface. So you do need to make special. You have to have special concern for that. But there's many tools and techniques that really make that quite transparent, and ability to operate sort of seamless between your on-prem and in the cloud with proper tooling and so forth. It's all very doable. And the CIS pre-configured hardened operating system images from the marketplace really makes it easier to stay secure, because you can quickly spin one up and apply your workload, and you're starting in a secure place.
So I think I'd like to learn more about that offline. If maybe
Absolutely, Jen.
We use some of those, I believe, in the AWS piece in-house at Senteon. So
be happy to talk to you, Jen, or anyone else who wants to engage in a conversation.
That sounds,
awesome.
Definitely. Now my mind is spinning. Zach knows, I know that look.
All right. So today, before we go into the topic, which again, we only have about 4 configurations we're going to be talking about today. We do have some mixture of L2 settings, server only, so it will be a little bit more in depth, but given it's only 4, I do have one other question on something you said, Jen. You're talking about, this came up last week, but escalating the conversation and how CISOs are starting to get a seat at that board level. We're talking about system configurations, benchmarks, the buzzwords that I hear today is like stronger security posture, better cyber hygiene. Like when you're sitting at these boardrooms, having these discussions with executives who aren't necessarily in the security space, are you bringing up security posture, like specific settings? Like how do these conversations look?
So that's a really good question. The landscape has changed, right? Like I always like to frame it. If you're on the headline or above the fold in a paper or front page on you know, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, pick your medium, X, Twitter, wherever. No one wants to be there.
Mm-mm.
Executives do not care about settings. They don't know about settings.
Yep.
And the long and short of it is, I remember back in 2003, CIO for a Fortune 5 company said to me in a room with other CIOs, Jen, my biggest challenge is I don't know how to articulate the spend to others in the room. And this is where the conversation has dramatically shifted, because there are now consequences if you do not, if your board was not made aware of a MIG in your network, or some sort of whether internal, external breach, that now has long lasting, not just company ramifications, but we're starting to see where it will individually follow a person in charge. So for that reason,
Those public companies' stock price too.
oh, well, the rebranding, I mean, I'll call it the target hack,
Yeah, sure.
and really that's what you want to be known as. No, I'm pretty sure their marketing department, built their brand off of something else. But brand reputation, if you don't have all of that set in place prior, then it's going to get real ugly real fast. And I'll just say, I've enjoyed reading some press releases of hacks, or when somebody had to uncover what happened. And the first press release to like the 10th press release are so different, because you can tell companies that actually thought about it, ran drills, understood the impact, had a canned statement, worked with the PR team of how to process crisis management, and those that don't. Those are words that boards understand. Crisis management, how do we make sure that we're not on the front page of whatever medium you're reading, and they just need to know, here's your benchmark, say, across X number of controls, where's your setting, where are we? As a team, we agree that we're going to take X amount of risk across everything. If you build a business case right there, do you need more money? If you're not at where you need to be, get the money, get the sign off. If the board that chooses not to sign off and something happens, guess what? That's now on the board. So
That's right.
it's the old, you don't want the CNN crew up front while an executive has a raincoat over his head and is leaving the building.
Nope. No, and what I like to, since we are kind of geared toward an MSP audience, what I like to, when I speak with MSPs is, kind of understanding these baselines that Senteon can present really gives you a glimpse into what kind of risk you're inheriting with a new client.
Yep.
And it also is a project roadmap for things that need to be solved. So, and when you present that report to a senior executive that is responsible for that data or that infrastructure, you can't unsee that report. Like you were saying, Jen, you need to take action at that point. It's your responsibility as a custodian of that data.
Yeah, but that's a great point of, I'm sure we've all been in the position to decide not to do business with somebody, and it's business, right? But if they have a really unkept house, do you want to bring that client on?
No, not.
I don't think
I would
so.
suggest that, you need to spend some project time to clean the house before you take the reins and have responsibility for that infrastructure.
Right. Show them how to mediate to level whatever and go.
Right
And
on.
we
suggest
that, but
from a CIS perspective, from a CIS controls perspective, implementation group 1 or IG1 is basic cybersecurity hygiene. And if you have major gaps within policy and the CIS controls implementation group 1, you are at risk. So, and those are those control policies is a project roadmap for MSPs to shore up the house.
Yeah.
And I want to let's transition into today's topic with these configurations, because talking about these Fortune 5 in your example, but Fortune 100, 500, it doesn't matter the size. From the MSP perspective, if you yourself get breached, that's supply chain across the board. We've all seen what happens with that. But also, if your client gets breached, that's your business model, right? You definitely need to know your risk, harden it, do these basics. So that's why we're here today. But let's go into some of these attacks that the CIS benchmarks may be able to mitigate and better prevent. So, Jen, today's topic. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just say one more quick thing on, because I think you bring up a great point on, not just looking at what the customer wants, but if I'm an MSP, I think, I have the responsibility to say, here's my house.
Yeah.
And if I lay down a Senteon report and say, this is our internals,
That's
this is
a cool idea.
where are yours? And I would encourage all MSPs, work that into your pitch and build to success. And that's just,
Love that.
I call it being a responsible citizen, but it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, to do our community service, us just like many other security vendors in the MSP space, that's free to do. We do offer NFRs, so you can get your proof of value, run a report, harden your own environment, run your gap assessment for your client, show them the differences. By default, these gap assessments are only going to be about 20% compliant with CIS. Windows does not come hardened out of the box. Nope. So it should be an easy sale, hopefully.
Yeah, and the fact that you do, you allow people to do those free scans like that, it's very, very powerful, and people should really take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate all the plugs today, guys, but getting into today's topic a little bit more. So we got a setting on shutdown, system cryptography, and system objects. So Jen, do you want to just give a high level of what we're going to be introducing today, and then we'll dive into more of those MITRE attack tactics these can mitigate?
Sure. So we've all heard the terms. We'll start with the cryptography, and it's as simple as authentication into your network, right? And there's multiple types. We'll get into what that particular one of these 4 settings, I think that is probably the one that will resonate most. The other 3 settings are probably going to be more, if I remember correctly, they're very specific to an administrator access, and there are a couple of servers.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So,
not gonna lie, these are a little bit more esoteric,
but they're important.
They're
always important.
All right, so that's the perfect intro. So let's get that first slide on the screen and go over some of these MITRE attack tactics with you, Jen. So we do have, the endpoint denial of service, OS credential dumping, masquerading. Do you mind just kind of giving an overview on a few of these, and if you can expand a little bit on why an attacker may be trying to perform these attacks in an environment?
Sure. The one that does make me laugh all the time, you don't hear about it as much as you used to, but the DDoS, denial of service, typically the actual number of times that you see that across the enterprise are so rare.
Really?
Because it's usually, in my experience, some data center that has gone offline, some MSP that has, or not MSP, some telecom service that has gone offline, but yet, let's just say the less technical people in a building used to default to that particular excuse because it was so ambiguous.
And it's going to be relating to the shutdown setting that we'll talk about today. But just like you said, it's relating to not being able to access the system. It turned off for a reason you can't tell, but it causes that disruption so the attacker gets the attention it wants.
And personally have never seen it just inside a network. I've seen it from the outside.
More
That-
power on the outside.
Right. And that's going to shut down not just you. It's like, think of it as having a power outage in your neighborhood. And of all of these, I'd say it's probably the oldest that we've had. And that's why it sometimes gets a default. That's what it was.
There's a high availability in Jen, as you mentioned, it's an old kind of attack vector. So there's a high availability of DDoS tooling out in the dark web that's very common and cheap. So there's that.
Yeah, that we do. I tend to forget about those people sometimes.
Yeah,
Could just be kids learning how to do this stuff. They're just having a field day.
yeah. Or you want to shut down school because they want to have a snow day or something.
Hey, I'm not gonna lie. I probably would have done that.
Right?
But now you can learn online. So
Yeah. So not if you shut down the whole learning system for the school though. So
oh yeah, you know what? Let's talk after. All right. So credential OS
Credential
dumping. Love the graphic. So you're talking more specific to operating system, like username, password. Somebody gaining access to that. Is that what?
Yeah, so just effectively extracting credentials and then tossing it on the dark web or whatever that is. It's just gaining that access.
I mean, in theory, if everything is configured right, any access that they did get should be encrypted. On the rare occasion that it wasn't, then someone's going to have a party. But
this will be relating to that cryptology, I believe, because if
exactly.
it is setting up, if it is configured correctly, you really mitigate the risk of this even being possible.
Yes, correct. And then as far as privileged escalation, 2 words: solar winds, right? Like,
good 2 words.
Let's go back to business. Business, who needs access to what in order to do their job? And if I'm in marketing, I don't need access to what is going on in the accounting and finance area. So make sure that you've provisioned your users accordingly. So
and deep provision.
And deep, the bigger, right? How many former employees are still live in Active Directory?
Yeah, we had an episode talking about that. Was it Larry?
Oh yeah, Larry, Trash Can Larry. He had access for years after he was gone.
It was the actual username.
It was not Trash Can Larry. I kind of love that.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. I mean, escalating their privileges gives them more access to. Basically, they could take advantage of some of these configurations, change them to a different state in some scenarios so that they can perform their attack, right? By enforcing these and having these settings in place, you're restricting the ability of them even being able to do that. The next one here, masquerading, I mean, this goes straight to defense evasion. So intuitively, Jen, I mean, obviously an attacker wants to get a foothold in the system. They don't want to be found, but how common is this? Do attackers really get in the system and then just sit around?
Oh God, yeah. So,
did I lay that up?
It's like somebody with a suicide vest, right? So they're just sitting at the bus stop, waiting for the bus to come by, hit the go button, and they're off. And there's, not to pick on Target, but it was somebody that was in their network, and this is all public. I may have worked for the company at the time that did do their security, but regardless, it's all public. All the triggers and alerts went off, but that agent that came in through the HVAC system, it triggered alerts. All the tools worked, but it was a help desk in India that never responded to the alerts and the notification. So you can have the best security in the world, but it's still people, process, and technology. There's still,
getting around it.
Machines do not attack machines. Somebody has to go in and execute what that attack is going to be. They could script it up, but it still originated somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, even there's a whole business around access brokers.
Oh,
So
100%.
their mission is just to gain that access and then resell those credentials to someone who wants to exfil data potentially.
I mean, they even have helped us to, oh, you need help setting that up?
They do. It's a business. It's
a
very,
business.
very well run businesses.
Right. And, so masquerading, I put that right in the old, for people that aren't familiar, just tack it into what you would know as phishing. Right.
Mhm.
And that ties back to less, in my opinion, less benchmarking, more user education.
Yeah.
And that is an area that where we still to this day, users are some of our biggest vulnerability, not because of they're trying to do anything wrong. It's just
Mhm.
they don't, you know, they're not, they're there to do artwork or accounting, not
There you
there to
go.
be the IT specialist.
No, and you don't want them to be. So you
No,
need to build systems to protect them and infrastructure. Kind of against ourselves to some extent.
that's right.
But there's techniques to do that properly, and everyone gets their job done with no issues.
That's right. That's right. And listen, no one wants to be the pool jerk, right?
Oh, no, no
No.
one wants to be responsible for that breach, and it's very embarrassing for anyone.
Yeah. And these CIS benchmarks, I know we brought up phishing. So to elaborate even more on that, yes, awareness, probably the most important layer at that, but having the system strongly configured, if a phishing email is clicked, the executables goes live, right? By having that hardened environment, you're mitigating that blast radius. Maybe that single machine is compromised, but by having these CIS benchmarks in place, you're reducing the risk of further damage across your business.
Well, so we'll say a yes and a no, right? It's not uncommon for these types of executables to sit dormant
Mm-hmm.
for a good amount of time within the
6
network.
months plus.
And that's where I say back to it's like somebody with the suicide vest, they're going to execute it when they want to. So you may have an executable that releases into your network, it's in the wild, and it just sits and watches. And it can either gather information or not, and then decide when to shoot off.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be up to 18 months. I've heard recently from people that they're saying it's under 12 months, but who knows?
It's too long either way.
Either way, it should never get there.
Right.
And there's a lot of tool sets that say that they actually can identify it. Where I think Senteon plays such a key role is, you identify lateral movement, and if there is movement, then let's go back to solving that problem. Where'd the movement come from? What caused the movement? Why are my settings out of whack? And I've got a baseline report that says this was X, Y, and Z. How and what moved it or changed it?
Right, right. Because in order to perform some of these lateral movement techniques you're talking about, they would need to change these configurations, which is exactly where Senteon sits. We can identify which machine had the configuration change. SMB1 just kicked on out of nowhere. That should probably be a red flag. So that's exactly a perfect use case.
Yeah.
All right,
And just one more thing to that point too. So you have all of that baseline information captured, stored. It's essentially an audit log, which is critical. And then if that file did kick off and do damage, regrettably, then you have that best effort use case for your insurance company that requires that.
And your board, right?
And your board. And it really saves your job ultimately.
And I'll even go further and say, because any breach now has to be publicly disclosed. So you now have that defense case that says this is what happened. Boom.
We took best effort steps. These are the policy and the standards we followed, and it's demonstratable.
I like
All
it.
right.
It's a good position to be in.
Yeah. So
Yeah, really. It is a power spot.
Yeah.
to wrap up this slide and jump into the settings, file and directories discovery, similar to OS credential dumping, right? They want to get access. They want to have more knowledge, more things they can extract and hold against you. So really in line with that. And then obfuscated files or information. Again, that's changing the data, right? Making it non-compliant or extracting data. So again, these CIS benchmarks, when we talk about these, they're highly preventative. They're that proactive, critical layer to prevent the attack from being successful. So, all right, with that, let's hop into a few of these settings. We do have about 20 minutes left, so we can spend about 4 minutes even on each setting if we do have a lot to talk about. So, Rich, while I share my screen and kind of show some of the CIS, what they provide, do you mind just doing a quick reminder on what the CIS benchmarks are and why they're in place?
Yeah, sure. So security professionals worldwide rely on the CIS benchmarks for the very prescriptive settings, configuration settings that they offer for many types of technologies. We make benchmarks for operating systems, firewall, routers, mobile devices, and they're very complete documents that are very specific on proper security settings for all of those different technology types. And Zach and I have been kind of, focusing this series on diving into the various benchmark settings, because sometimes they can be a little bit confusing. CIS curates these settings through a consensus process. We work with the vendor to come up with a draft, and then we organize and manage a group of worldwide experts to come up with these settings, and they're tested against the MITRE ATT&CK frameworks. It's not a lab exercise. These are attack tested and proven settings that are, and if you're operating in a regulated industry, using our settings, the CIS benchmark settings, is an element of compliance in many frameworks like PCI, HIPAA, FedRAMP, things like that. So I think Zach's getting done clicking around.
Rich got to see behind the scenes of me clicking around. But what I was showing there too is something else CIS provides. They do provide the description, rationale, and potential impact of changing these settings. So Senteon does incorporate that straight into our single pane of glass so that you can digest it straight from our solution. Additionally, we talked about it earlier, so I thought I'd show off our gap assessment. By default, you saw it. It's about 20% compliant out of a Windows box. That's not going to be doing anything.
The standard out of the box settings would comply with about 20% of the CIS benchmark settings, which is a large gap. You are exposing yourself to unnecessary risk by using an OS out of the box without modifying settings.
Yeah. So Senteon does help out configuring that other 450 settings right there for you. But with that said, Jen, let's hop into the first setting, and a good one in my opinion. So this one, as a heads up, is server only. So this is a server only setting, and it is to allow system to be shut down without having to log in, set to disabled. Jen, could you kind of educate the room why you may not just want anyone to be able to shut down a server without logging in?
Yeah, I don't want anyone to open my car without having a key, right?
Right.
So this would be a clear sign or a definite vulnerability. But if you had, for example, malware or something on the inside, and it was not that could detect and shut down your server, that would not be good. So by disabling it, only people who actually have admin or the proper admin rights will be able to shut down the server.
Yep, and properly logged in with those admin rights.
Correct. It's almost a check and a balance, right?
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, of course, during maintenance windows and when it's scheduled to be shut down, you want to make sure your correct users have the ability to do that. So this just makes sure the right people have the right access.
And yeah, and especially when you're talking MSPs, because you may have an administrator, a local administrator from your company.
Co-managed bases are very common.
Right. And so again, this is, I would say, they're all critical,
Yeah,
right?
they are.
But this is definitely, you don't want to mess around with this.
And this one might be one of the truer ones to the endpoint denial of service. You know, if it does get shut down, that is the truth.
Yeah.
Service does stop at that point.
Yep.
Right.
All right, let's get into the probably most exciting setting today. So, Jen, we're going to be getting into system cryptography, and I want to preface that this setting only applies to the workstation only, and this is an L2 setting. So, full disclosure here, many businesses probably can't handle this type of security recommendation from CIS.
When Josh says L2, I'm sorry.
Josh.
Zach says L2. I don't know.
I promise we're friends, guys.
We just met. Sorry. So when Zach says L2, that is the benchmark profile. So generally we're talking about the level 1 profiles, but this is a benchmark level 2, kind of a defense in depth sort of setting. And that's what that L2 means.
Yeah. So Jen, can you tell us a little bit, what is system cryptography? You gave a high level at the start of this, but why would CIS say to force strong key protection for users with keys stored on the computer? You know, the recommendation is to have users manually input this, it sounds like. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. So when you're talking cryptography, there could be a few different types. And again, we talk internet, we're talking computers, everything is standardized. With this, depending on your business type and how you have to deal with regulations, you may need just username and password might be your policy. Okay. It's all I need. I require maybe every 6 months, come in, change it, or 6 weeks, whatever it might be. However, if you're a financial institution, you may require 2 authentication layers, and some people do also 3 authentication layers. And these could involve either some type of soft token that would be on your actual laptop, device, what have you. It could be a hard token like a RSA or a physical card that you actually tie to your computer, along with your username and password. And then there's also, not to confuse it, but there could also be a local specialty key cut for a local certificate authority that then would be just specific to your company. But that key has to tree down from what's in the browsers. And this, I mean, the browser stuff and the keys have not changed for years. I mean, when they all started back in the day, and Steve Jobs and Microsoft were going at it, hammer and tongue, trying to figure out who was going to own the browser market. At that point, they put those standards and those keys in place. It's not like you can just go start your own certificate already. And that's where, again, the keys are perfect. There's only so many numbers. I had the pleasure of working with and learning about cryptography. I can't say it, from one of the, they called him Dr. Crypt because he helped define these standards back in the day. If you don't, you have to understand it, you have to respect it, and it's important to a company to maintain those standards. And you don't want to simplify it. I think two-factor on any application is personally my best practice, whether it's my personal information or what I recommend. If you are a financial institution, you may have triple. So, and even additional for if you're going to log into specific apps. So this is not about workflow disruption. However, if you don't have these, you have the potential for workflow disruption to
You can
everybody.
anticipate it.
Exactly.
And to take that a step further, Jen, maybe if not just not having access, like not knowing where it is, but configuring the user rights assignments to making sure the right people have the right access to the right things, right? It creates many more layers of complexity, which I would be inclined to think that's why CIS put this as an L2.
Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah.
Very
This
cool.
is like baseline.
Yep. All right. Defense in depth for sure. So, all right, let's hop into these next two settings. This is going to system objects. And as a heads up, these are two settings that out of the box actually do come configured to the compliance state. So
Part of the 20%.
part of the 20%, we found the two settings that make that up partially. So let's get into this. This is definitely some deeper internal pieces of Windows, but require case insensitivity for non-Windows subsystems set to enabled. So, why would we want to make sure this is set up?
So I kind of love this one because intuitively
Yep.
it's not going to work, right? Like first of all, would anybody do a non-case sensitive password in today's environment? Probably not. Johnny was
Unless an app requires it.
true. That is true. But
Yeah.
I'd question that app.
I agree. I'm with you on that, but
but so it's great at that to have the default as, yeah, you know what? We're going to keep this so simplified on the server side that you almost can't break it.
Yep.
That's exactly where it is. Yep. So, all right, that one was very straightforward, and I think this next one, maybe a little bit more in depth. It has a little example in this setting named Jen. So, strengthen default permissions of internal system objects. Again, going into that internal system, but it mentions symbolic links. And we mentioned in that did you know internal system objects are foundational components of an OS. So could you kind of talk towards this and why this is enabled?
Right. And this is interesting too, because this is something that, Zach and I have talked about, and he has a lot of people that are asking him specifically about this setting. And when it comes to distributing Senteon with from an MSP to their clients.
Yep.
Did I put that right, Zach?
Yep.
All right. So
so this comes up a lot in our findings over at Senteon because these symbolic links in Hyper-V is used a lot of time for remoting into their client system. So
right.
There's times where if you do have symbolic Hyper-V installed, you may need to change some of these CIS benchmark recommendations to allow your workflows to be successful. So again, everyone listening today, you got to know these CIS benchmarks, they're not perfect for everyone. They're the optimal state in a clean business, fresh off the ground. If you can start there and build from there, that'd be great. But the reality is the majority of people implementing these CIS benchmarks already have a business up and running, right? You're changing settings in use day-to-day processes. So Senteon does its best to help mitigate the need to test and break fix is the terminology. But end of the day, you definitely need to go into this carefully and make sure you can still perform those critical operations every single day.
And what I love about Senteon too, Zach, is you can for a setting like this, let's say you needed to enable this for you can turn things on and turn things off very quickly and easily and keep track of that. And I think you could even schedule a notification. It's like, hey, we're gonna have this open for one day because we're doing maintenance or something, and then make sure that it's flipped the correct direction as quick as possible.
Yeah, and I'll go back to in the beginning of our conversation today. You asked why security. I like to solve problems. I like to know what the solution is. These two tool sets give you the clues to understand where to look, what might be that issue, and how to fix it.
It's kind of the easy button, right?
Right?
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I like solving problems, but listen, I'm not going to take the long road.
Yeah, exactly. No, the long road is fraught with error and
Yes.
Ton of
Wasted time.
error, a lot of
Misfortune.
user time. I mean, and that does conclude kind of these configurations that we're talking about today. So just to extend a little bit on that, you know, CIS today, a lot of it from what I've heard in the market, it's engineers creating these ad hoc PowerShell scripts and trying to deploy that across the board without that type of feedback if it was successful or not. So having CIS is absolutely incredible because they give you the recommendations, but you do need to
you need to be able to operationalize them and manage them, and that's the tricky part.
That's the hard part here. Now, that was an awesome discussion. Thanks for getting into those 4 settings with us, Jen. I was nervous we wouldn't take up the full hour, but I should know when we get together, we can always go on.
Yeah, absolutely. Or
But,
fill time with football discussions.
Oh, we easily could do that. So I got 2 fantasy drafts today, one for Senteon as well. So getting into
where is my invite for that, by the way?
you're gonna have to take that up with Cliff Chow. So
Giants fan.
Yep. So
Bills fans, so I don't really watch football much.
I knew you were a Mafia. I could tell.
All right.
I'm
So
a Patriots fan, so there we go.
Jen, besides sharing your love for Tom Brady to close us out, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to leave us with before I wrap up?
I will. Like I said, being a veteran of the industry, I've seen a lot of things come and go. This is just such a intelligent way to understand what you have, what you don't have, what's turned on, reduce that, mitigate against anything that can be harmful, and help educate your users. And,
what better things are there?
there isn't. In partnerships with CIS, it's just, and you alerted to it as well. It's like not everybody is going to need everything within the benchmarks, but there's a lot of non-direction that's out there, and this definitely points everybody in the right direction.
You need to follow policy of some sort. I mean, benchmarks aren't policy, but they're part of a policy.
Yep.
And you need to have that kind of that big picture, and benchmarks, CIS benchmarks are a one element that folks really need to pay attention to stay safe.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely.
And I'm probably #1 advocate for Senteon. I'll fight the battle.
I love it. Well, thank you for joining us, Jen and Rich. Awesome to have you in studio. We're going to go take a little tour of Stanford after this. So really excited for the day.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You guys enjoy.
Thank you. Jen, we'll follow up on those CIS hardened images. And if anyone else wants to talk to me about them too, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And we are here every single week. Again, there are about 450 CIS benchmarks. So we have a lot more presentations upcoming, and we are here every single Wednesday. We aim to do 1 p.m. Every week, although that will be changing next week. I think we're actually meeting with Adam Evans from Simplex IT. I think we're doing it Thursday at 1 p.m. So I will update that accordingly. A newsletter should be coming out about that as well. You can subscribe to that on my LinkedIn, and email newsletter is in the works. But yeah, last thing here, Rich and I are always happy to connect on LinkedIn. If you can share next slide. And Senteon does provide these NFRs to MSPs, and you can run your own gap assessment, scanning that QR code, or just visiting the website. It's optional to even talk to me. You can just sign up on your own. So always happy to give that deep dive and be there during that process as well. So thank you everyone for being here, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.